BMOP Production Studios in the beautiful state of Arkansas, you're listening to the Shattered Podcast with your host, D. Elias.
Today in my studio, I have Sergeant Greg Davignon with Sevier County Sheriff's Department. How long have you been employed?
I've been working here since 2010.
Okay.
So this is my ninth year.
Ninth year.
Starting my ninth year, yes, ma'am.
What inspired you to join law enforcement?
Well, I guess what I would say my first taste or my first insight into law enforcement, one of the city officers here in DeQueen, his wife was actually my babysitter when I was a child. So that was my first look at, seeing, a police officer and seeing them come through and kind of interact and that kind of stuff. And that kind of started my first taste of kind of wanting to be part of that, or, because there was, I don't know if you're familiar with the area where Provo is in Sevier County, but when I was growing up in the 90s, in that community, 90s and the early 2000s, there were a multitude of police officers that lived in that area. You had Bobby Bagley, you had Benny Simmons, you had Mickey Helms, Chad Bradshaw, Scott Simmons. There was just Hoot Gibson. All those guys lived within literally 2 miles of my house or 3. So I got to see police officers all the time, and that's really where I got my first taste of wanting to be part of law enforcement.
Right. Tell me a drug-related story that has affected you the most.
I don't know if this one would be the one that's affected me the most, but I can definitely talk about one that stands out the most. When I first started, I hadn't been here long. I don't even know if I'd been to the academy yet, or I may have just gotten back. I got sent up to a house in Gillum. I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but when I got there, it was a call about we're going to help DHS because they were going to do a home interview about some kids that I guess had been reported as possibly being neglected and that kind of stuff. So we get up there, knock on the door. Well, the dad to the family, he's out in the yard looking up into the trees, just kind of disconnected. At that time, I really hadn't had a lot of experience of dealing with people that were under the influence of methamphetamine because I was brand new. So he's just out there kind of wandering around doing his own thing. We get in the house. The mom is terrified. She's kind of in a crisis of her own. And she said, "Can he hear me?" And I said, "No, he's out in the yard talking to, some other people." And she said, "I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I'm glad you guys are here." Well, when we go into the house, it reeks of feces and just old garbage. And there's just little pathways through the living area where you can walk, and the rest it's dirty clothes and trash and just filth. Well, there's 3 kids in the home, and if I don't want to get their ages wrong, but I think the youngest one was like 18 months, and then it kind of stair-stepped up from there about 2 years apart, 18 months, and then maybe a 3-year-old and like a 5 to 7-year-old, something like that. And so DHS, they start going through the house and looking, and there's no food in the fridge, just beer. There's some liquor bottles everywhere. I think the only thing in the fridge was maybe like a half a pack of bologna that had mold on it, some cheese, maybe a half thing of milk. That's it in the whole house. No bread, no cereal. I mean, we're talking, there wasn't even baby formula or anything. The 18-month-old was still being bottle fed. So we go into the bedroom where there's kid stuff everywhere laying, and there's needles, there's pipes for methamphetamine, there's a bag of meth literally laying on the table that if the child had crawled in there and got a hold of it, could have easily got it in his mouth. And it turned my stomach because, number one, there was kids living in somewhere that you or I or normal people wouldn't let a dog live.
Right.
But there's kids living in that kind of conditions. Well, after we talked to them for a little while, they had just got their income tax. It was that time of year where they got their income tax check back. And they had got something like $6,000 back for their taxes. And the wife told me that she was allowed to buy 1 set of clothes. She was allowed to buy 1 set of clothes for each of the kids and allowed to spend, I believe, $300 on groceries. The rest of it, the husband spent on methamphetamine.
So she did not do drugs at all, the mom?
She did. She did do drugs, but it was kind of a pressure thing from her husband that basically, if you're going to live here and be with me, you're going to support my habit. But what I'm saying is, out of $6,000 in their tax return, well over $5,000 of it was spent on drugs, and they didn't even buy food for the house hardly or anything. So as a young officer, young deputy, I was like, wow, this is a nightmare. I can't believe I never knew that there was these kind of places existed, and it made me think, well, this can't be an isolated incident. There's got to be more of this going on that we're not seeing.
Right.
And over the course of my career, I found that to be true. But that one sticks out the most in my mind.
Right.
Because it was my first look into what people put themselves and their families through when they're addicted to that.
Did that kind of set the stage for your mentality at that point?
At that point, when we were done with that call and we made the arrests and, the husband was arrested and that kind of stuff, at that point in my career, it made me want to seek it out and want to arrest people for that and find ways and I guess get better at finding it, because in my mind at that time, I took the dad out of that situation and sent him to prison.
Right.
And in my mind, that was helping those kids, but in reality, that may not have been the case.
Since you've joined law enforcement, how many addicts have you seen just repeatedly in and out of prison?
All the time. I have no idea what number, but when I first started, I was in the jail. So I seen a lot of repeat people, coming in over the weekends and stuff for different offenses. And it might be, yes, they might be an addict. They might be addicted to methamphetamine, but they might be getting picked up for a petty theft or a shoplifting. And that's not because they're going to Dollar General store or Walmart and stealing some speakers or a cell phone accessory or something. They're not stealing that because they want to use it. They're stealing that because they're going to go trade it to the dope man for $50 worth of meth. So they're getting arrested for a petty little charge, but the bigger picture is they're stealing that stuff because they're trying to support their addiction.
Right.
So yeah, I mean multiple times you've seen the same faces in and out.
To me, locking up addicts doesn't fix the problem. I mean, if they go to prison due to crimes they've committed while they're an addict, that's one thing. But if they go to prison because they're an addict, it's not fixing the problem. They go to prison for 6 months, get back out, and I've even had them tell me that they stayed high the whole time they were in prison because they're able to get anything they want.
Yes, of course. I mean, I agree with you there. If you arrest somebody for simple possession, it's a Class D felony. The greatest amount of time they could get is 6 years, minimum being probation. So if we send that guy up to prison, he's there for 3 to 6 months, on a D felony. The whole time, like you said, he's able to have access to the drug. What are we really doing other than wasting taxpayer money?
Right.
Because all we're doing is keeping him up there. The only thing that we're doing by keeping him in prison is maybe he's not stealing a couple of small things around the county or the city.
Right.
But other than that, we're really not doing anything because we're going to turn him back out and he's going to do the same thing because he hasn't been able to beat his addiction in prison.
Right. Because he's staying high in prison.
Exactly.
He gets out, and so there's no rehabilitation whatsoever.
No.
What changed your mentality about drug addiction and dealing with addicts?
Well, even before the program started, I think it was back in 2017, the first part of 2017, before it even started, I kind of got to the point where it's like a revolving door, and you just see the same faces and the same people and the same thing over and over and over. And I got to a point where I was like, I would see somebody drive by, I'm like, man, I know he doesn't have a driver's license. I know I can stop him. I know I can probably search him and probably find something, but I kind of got to, what's the point?
Right.
Why? I kind of got, I don't want to say cynical to it, but I got just numb to it. Like, why am I going to stop this guy and try to waste my time doing a few hours of paperwork just to send him off to prison for 6 months, and they're just going to turn him back loose on us, and he's going to be doing the same thing. Why waste my time? But it got to a point when the program started, and when the program first started, I was like, man, they're just going to play you guys. They're not going to. All they're going to do is try to beat the system and try to stay out of prison, and they're going to do their little 90 days, and they're going to get back and do the same thing. But I didn't really realize what all the program actually had as part of it. Now that I know, I definitely see it from a different angle.
Okay. just so everyone knows, when you say program, you're talking about the RSET program,
Yes, ma'am.
which is the Residential Substance Abuse Treatment.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. When you arrest addicts, do they often ask you for help?
Before the program started, no. There was a lot of animosity, I would say, when you go out there and bust somebody. And I think a lot of it is not because they're mad at law enforcement or they're mad at me personally. I think they're just ashamed of it finally catching up to them. Because, and what I tried to do, I would explain to them when they started getting mad or upset, yeah, you're caught. You got caught with meth today. But how many times have you been driving around carrying it with you or using it and you didn't get caught? You get caught 1 out of every 100 times, you had a pretty good record until you got caught today. It's kind of like a game. In my mind, it's like an adult version of hide and seek. Except the game for us, for law enforcement, is if we lose and we don't find it, we just go home and go on about our business and get up and go the next day. If they lose, they're going to prison.
Right.
So as far as them asking for help, once the program started, I started seeing a change in people because word started slowly getting out there that, hey, they're actually helping people that are addicted. Now, there's a difference between somebody that's addicted and somebody that's selling. Now, somebody that's selling,
absolutely,
I have no sympathy for at all, whatsoever, because there's a difference between somebody that's selling methamphetamine to support their own habit, and they're just nickel and diming here and there to support their own addiction,
right? And
there's somebody that's gaining financial gain from it. That I have a problem with, and those people I have no mercy for. So, but I'm sorry to get back to your question. Yes, I have had people on a stop here recently that I walk up, we do our little routine as far as, is there anything in the car? No, there shouldn't be, or, you can search and all this kind of stuff. And then once I find what they have in the car, they're like, man, I've been having a problem. I can't get any help. Is there something you can do? I've heard about, these people at the jail. It's all over Facebook. They're talking about, y'all are helping people that are addicted. What do I have to do? I would say, I'm not going to mention this guy's name, but a few weeks ago, I had a guy on the side of the road, same thing. I got some drug paraphernalia off of him. He said, hey, I'm interested in the program. Do I qualify for it? And I said, with your history, yes. If you would like me to put in a good word with you with the jail administrator and the prosecutor, I will. And he said, yes, please do that. And that's just from word getting out about the RSAT program on Facebook. I mean, that's
so
it's pretty serious.
Right.
I mean, I've never had somebody do that before then.
Instead of him being all nervous, oh my God, I'm going to prison, he was reaching out to you. He knew he needed help and he wanted to be a part of the program.
Exactly.
So
and they knew exactly what the program was and what it entails, and they were asking for it before we even made it to the jail. I mean, we weren't even in my vehicle yet to head to the jail,
right?
And they were already talking about needing help,
right?
And people like that, to me, I want them to get help,
right?
And there's people, one that's not as recent as this one, that I know have been to prison 3 and 4 times for possession and for theft and stuff like that. And, they'll hit me up on Facebook or something and be like, hey, do you think you can put in a good word for me? I know I've kind of been a turd, for a while, and their word's not mine, but I want some help. I'm ready to grow up and beat this addiction. And, people like that, I'm going to help them if I can.
And if they truly want it, it'll work.
Right.
What type of drugs do you see most in this county?
I would say the most prevalent problem we have in Sevier County is definitely methamphetamine. Marijuana is being decriminalized so bad that it's not really even an issue. I mean, I know we have people out there that are smoking marijuana and doing their things with it, and I know there's people that are on the fence about that. To me, I think our focus should be more on methamphetamine and prescription abuse.
Right.
Which
is opioids.
Yes, ma'am. And in this county, there are a lot of people that are addicted to prescription drugs. A lot, even more so than methamphetamine. I mean, and that's just the reality of it.
Right.
So we see a lot of people that, maybe by no fault of their own, it could be something simple as they were in an accident, or, they were injured at work or something. and they've been a good person their whole life, never done anything wrong, and then for whatever reason, they get addicted to pain medicine, and they can't help it.
Right.
And then, maybe they lose their job because
Mm-hmm.
they fail a drug test for it. They're not prescribed it anymore, and then that person who's been a good person their whole life and been a productive member of society, then they have to go find a drug dealer.
Right.
Because the doctor's not going to issue them any more pain medicine because they're already past their illness.
That's exactly right.
The doctor's not going to help them beat their addiction.
That happens more.
They're just not going to write them a prescription anymore. So now that person has that need and has that addiction. What are they going to do? They're going to have to go find a drug dealer.
Right. That happens.
They're going to have to find somebody that's going to sell it to them.
Than people realize.
It happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And
exactly.
the thing is, a lot of people don't realize also, in the state of Arkansas now, possession of hydrocodone, like if you get stopped with 2 or 3 pills of hydrocodone, it's the same charge as being stopped with a gram of meth. Exactly the same. They are no different. And that's something that's a recent thing in Arkansas, but that's how it is.
And that's if it's not in a prescription bottle with their name on it.
Yes, ma'am. If you get stopped and they don't have a prescription and it's not theirs, same as being in possession of methamphetamine or cocaine.
Wow.
Exactly the same. And there's a lot more people in our area that are addicted to opioids than there is methamphetamine. Don't get me wrong, we have a lot of people out there that are on meth. But I guess the mentality is that, oh, well, this is a pill, this was made in a pharmacy, this isn't as bad. That might be true in some aspects of it, but it still does the same thing to your brain.
Right. Well, a lot of people think if it's prescription, it's okay, but it's not okay because they have an addiction.
Right.
I know a lot of doctors have stopped prescribing narcotics, but that just sends them to the streets, the black market, to get them.
Mm-hmm. And another problem we have in this area that we see quite often is, say today is what's today, the 3rd?
Yes.
Say today's the 3rd, and somebody goes and gets 40 or 60 hydrocodones issued to them from the doctor for whatever their ailment is. And then a week later, they're supposed to take 2 or 3 a day or whatever it is. And a week later, their house gets broken into and their prescriptions are stolen. Well, they come up there to the sheriff's office and get a report. We hand it to them, and they go back to the next doctor and try to get another prescription issued. And what they're doing, a lot of times we figured out, is they're either selling them or they're addicted to the point they're abusing them.
Right.
So that's kind of a big indicator. We catch on to that pretty quick.
The years that I was a bail bondsman, I had several to tell me they would start out getting prescription hydrocodones, and then the doctor would wean them off and cut off their prescriptions. So they would reach out to a drug dealer, but they were like $8 to $10 per pill. It's just ridiculous. Well, they couldn't afford that. So what would they resort to? It would be meth, because meth is so much cheaper.
Right, and we've seen that a lot too. Like you said, a hydro on the street, $5 to $10, depending on what potency you get. Because there's hydro 10s, there's hydro 5s, that kind of stuff. Depending on what you get, and then you can go out there now and you can buy a gram of methamphetamine for $40, or even cheaper if you depending on your situation. And the high is going to last a lot longer. They're going to be able to medicate themselves longer on methamphetamine. Right. And then once you're addicted to that, then the pills really don't matter anymore. Why waste your time trying to spend $40 and only get, 5 or 6 pills, and then you can go get a gram of dope for the same amount.
Right. And the sad thing is
and then it compounds the problem because you can't get a job if you're addicted to methamphetamine most of the time, because if it's a place that drug tests, you're not going to get hired there.
Right.
And it's just, and so then you can't support your habits, so you have to steal. In my opinion, thefts, 90 to 95% of all thefts can be tied back to a drug addiction.
Absolutely.
If not more. I mean, that's being sparing, is given in the 90% range. Probably more. You can tie it back to some type of addiction.
Absolutely, because a few of the drug addicts that I know would take up to 20 hydrocodones per day. So that's expensive.
Oh, yeah.
That's a very expensive habit.
You're spending $100 a day right there.
Right.
So,
and if you're not working...
And if you're needing that for a month and you're not working...
Right.
You've got to steal.
That's exactly right. Is there another story that you have that a drug arrest that has affected you throughout the years?
I can think of another one that made me sad because there was kids involved. All the ones that have children involved, they're the ones that really touch my heart because I have kids of my own, and there was one time I stopped these two ladies, and there was 3 kids in the car. 2 of them belonged to one lady, one belonged to the other. And when I pulled them over, they were extremely nervous. They were shaking, all the things that you look for.
Mm-hmm.
It smelled like marijuana in the vehicle, which is not a major thing. Well, other than they're driving on the road with marijuana in their car and their kids are in there. But that just kind of led me to my probable cause to get into the car. Well, when I searched the car, there were open needles, syringes, there were meth pipes, there was methamphetamine, there were pills, there was Xanax and Hydros and all that stuff. Well, all of this stuff was in a black case, and it was stuffed underneath in the floorboard back there where the kids were. So the adults, when I pulled them over, because that stuff had been up front, I later found out it had been up front in the console, and they pulled it out and stuck it back behind the seat where the kids were as I was pulling them over. So the kids are there, and they're crying, and they're upset, and I hate arresting people in front of their kids. It breaks my heart because I don't want the kids to get a negative taste about law enforcement because all they're going to see is mommy's getting taken away by the cops, and they don't know that mommy's addicted to methamphetamine.
Right.
They just know that the mean cop took mommy away.
Right.
And that's what I hate, because even though they put me in that situation, the kid is still going to see, well, the cops took mom away. So this case in particular, I get them, and as I'm standing there searching the car, somebody calls, somebody that's there. It was in a little residential neighborhood where I stopped them. Somebody calls dispatch, and they're like, hey, one of those ladies that you're out there with just threw something in the bushes.
Oh, no.
So I'm leaned in the car. I can't focus my attention completely on them. Well, sure enough, go over there. Well, there's more drugs and another pipe in the bushes where she had thrown it. And the kids, they ended up, thank goodness DHS didn't have to come get them. A family member was available to come pick them up. And we tried to explain to them, that, we're not the bad guy here. We're just trying to help, and the kids didn't understand. And it hurt my feelings that the kids have a negative taste about law enforcement now.
Right.
Because that kid's, I think one of them was 7 or 8. Now that kid's 18 and hates law enforcement because mom got sent away that time. It's kind of I hate that part about the job is probably what I hate the most, is that people don't really understand the full grasp of what's going on, and the kids don't understand. That's what I don't like.
There's a story when you said that, kind of reminds me when I was bounty hunting. I was after a young woman that had failed to appear on drug charges. And when I got to her house, it was just filthy. The kids were filthy. And I could tell that her and her boyfriend, who was not the father of the children, they were just paranoid as they could be and just couldn't sit down, And I told her she was going to jail. And I said, is there someone, a family member that I can call to come get these kids? Well, her and her mother had been fighting because of the drug. And so to pay the mother back, she wouldn't let the mother see the kids, which I know that family members, there's a lot of bridges that get burnt due to drug abuse. But the ones that was suffering out of that was the children. She was using the kids to fight her battle. And unfortunately, in that city and state that I was in, the child services, it was on the weekend, and I just think that since it was the weekend, they just simply didn't want to help. They chose to leave those 2 kids with the boyfriend, which I just left there with the mom feeling so bad. I just, I didn't want to leave them, but I couldn't let her just stay free either. So that's really bothered me because I felt like the kids were suffering.
Right.
And
That's the thing about, addiction is you're not the only person that you're hurting.
absolutely.
There's a lot of good families here in Sevier County that have been good families for years, and then they've got a child or a grandchild or a nephew or a niece or, brother, sister, cousin, whatever it is, that somehow gets addicted for whatever the circumstances are, whether they start in high school or they get a boyfriend or a girlfriend that peer pressures them into starting, and then that it affects the whole family.
Right.
I know from experience that just one person in your family being addicted can upset the balance of the entire family. There's a lot, and there's a lot of good families here that have that one person that gets addicted, and it disrupts everything. And it's unfortunate because everybody suffers, because when that person goes to prison or that person gets arrested, if they have children or if they have a job, then everybody else in the family has to carry that load.
That's right.
They have to support that kid that mom and dad's gone now. And that's what I hate it for the most is, addiction is not just you. It affects everybody in your life. And then another thing, back to the kids, if your 7 or 8 year old child is sitting there watching you put a needle in your arm or watching you suck on a meth pipe and all this stuff, they don't understand that that's wrong.
Right. That's their norm. That's their normal life.
If they don't understand that that's wrong, what do you think they're going to do when they get old enough? Well, I've seen mom and dad do this my whole life. This ain't that big of a deal.
Right.
Yeah, they left for jail a couple of times, but they always came back.
That is true, because that's all they've ever known. So to them, that lifestyle is normal.
Right.
How have you noticed, since the sheriff's office has implemented the RSET program, what is the community like now? Has it changed considerable?
I've seen of course, there's always going to be people that are naysayers, but I've seen a lot of the community support for the program. I've seen a lot of attitude changes across the board, not just law enforcement, but people in general.
Right.
I think the attitude has changed, and we still have a long way to go and a lot of work to do as far as getting information out there. And it really hasn't been going long enough to see the true result and the true potential of where it's going to go. Because I hope I'm not misstating, but I think it's about 70%.
Right, it is
successful
70.
right now.
Yes.
Pretty close to 70. So if you really think about it, if you got 10 people and then 7 of them beat addiction and they're no longer out there stealing, they're no longer out there using, and they're raising their families and they're holding jobs, we've already done better than the Arkansas Department of Corrections.
Absolutely.
Because I don't know what the percentage is out there as far as people that are going up there that are addicted, but I'm sure it's not 70.
Absolutely. Well, as the sheriff and Chris Walcott, we were talking the other day, the people that's already been through the program, and we were talking about the amount of money that it has saved the Arkansas Department of Corrections, it's a staggering number.
Oh, I'm sure. It's got to be. It's expensive
like
to feed.
$750,000.
It's expensive to house and feed those guys.
Yes.
It is. It's expensive for us to house and feed them here in the county.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you want to talk about saving people here locally money, I think that we definitely are, because number one, they're not having to pay taxes on feeding them up there at the jail, and number two, they're not having a chainsaw or a lawnmower or a TV come up missing while they're at work, trying to get a paycheck, and then you come home and you've been deprived of your property.
Right.
Because if you're curving 7 people to stop stealing, because if those 7 people were out there stealing,
right,
then that's just that much more of a likelihood that you're going to get your stuff stolen.
That's right. That's exactly right. This program, it kind of reminds me of, like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It's like it takes a village to help addicts to recover.
I agree.
And to soberize them,
I agree.
It takes the whole community.
I agree with that. Addiction, I know there's those people that say, well, addiction is a choice, and it is a choice. At some point, it is a choice. You're an adult. Mm-hmm. You made a choice to put that drug in your body. Nobody did it for you. But if you're not strong enough to realize that, If you're not strong enough to realize, hey, this is affecting me and my whole family and my community and the people that I've deprived of their property and their time and their money, then it's going to take an outside influence.
Right.
So we can't just have that old mentality of, well, they're an addict, throw them away and lock up the key until they're not an addict no more. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
It just doesn't. That is proven over time to not be effective.
Right.
If I can arrest the same guy, we'll say in a 5-year period, 3 times for possession and theft, then it's not working.
That's exactly
Now, if I
right.
can take that same guy and arrest him in 2019, he goes through our RSET program. He finds a way to beat addiction with the help of the community volunteers and us.
Right.
And now he's not out there stealing. He's holding down a job. He's got his kids back. We beat addiction as far as he's concerned. Now, if we magnetize that by the 70%, then I think we're making an impact.
Absolutely. We was also talking about there's 75 counties in the state of Arkansas. The percentages would just be outstanding if each county implemented this program and what it would save Arkansas Department of Corrections.
I agree.
Just this morning, I got an email that it shows $1 trillion is the estimated cost of opioid crisis on the U.S. economy. But what I thought was so interesting, I'm going to read this little bit. It said, to put the severity of this epidemic in perspective, $1 trillion is more than 300 times the amount that Congress set aside to combat opioid misuse last year. And none of these mentions the human toll of the crisis, which is beyond devastating. In 2017 alone, we lost more than 40,000 Americans to opioid overdose. So, I mean, that just shows that we're not even spending near the money, Congress is not, to try to help with treatments and stuff. It is just crazy. Is there anything you want to add?
No, ma'am, not that I can think of.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in, Greg.
Well, I appreciate you having me.
I hope other deputies and officers get the training they need for a change in their mentality where it comes to drug addicts.
I would like to say one more thing about that real quick, if that's okay.
Yes.
I've been doing this. This is my 9th year, and when I first started, it was my mentality that I needed to lock up and hunt and arrest every person that I possibly could. And I'm not saying that I'm going to stop hunting and stop searching, because I'm not. Because those people that we put in the program, they're not eligible for it until they're arrested.
That's right.
Because the sad reality is we don't have a center here that people can just walk up and say, hey, I'm addicted to methamphetamine, I need help. We don't have that here. We don't have that luxury.
Right.
And if we did, another reality is it would be too expensive for those people to even, unless you made it a free program or a free clinic, a free in-house treatment, those people still wouldn't be able to afford it. So the only way for these people to get help is for officers and deputies to be out there making arrests and keep digging, because, like you said, the fight to beat addiction it's going to take everybody.
Right.
It's going to take us out there making arrests. It's going to take the community support, and it's going to take the volunteers. I mean, it takes everybody, like you said. So the only advice I would give to other people is don't give up on our community just because we have a lot of people that are addicted to opioids and methamphetamine.
Right.
Don't give up. I mean, we can do it, but it's going to take everybody.
Yeah, takes
it's not
everybody
just
to fight.
It can't just be us.
Something you said triggered something that I think needs to be also thrown in there. A lot of the treatment facilities cost the parents or family members thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. This RSET program costs the family zero.
Zero.
And so that is, I mean, a lot of families know that their loved one needs help. They simply can't afford it.
Right.
The finances are not there.
And that's unfortunate too, because I've also seen people that I've arrested, like, man, you know I've got a problem, but I can't afford help.
Right.
I can't afford it. You know, my family, you know, because there's different economic classes of people that are addicted to methamphetamine that, you know, they may have the luxury of sending their child or grandchild to a treatment center. They may have those resources. Right. But you've got somebody on the lower end of the spectrum for income, they're not going to be able to afford that.
Right.
So it's just
and a lot of times if you send them on a personal note and it's not court ordered, after so many days, they just leave.
They can just walk out.
And so the parents or family members have been out all this money, and it didn't work, and they were able to just walk away. This program, you can't just walk away.
Right. And another thing that I've seen also with this program, even the people that do relapse, even the ones that, and I'm not going to say all of them, but I've seen several myself personally, even the ones that do fall short, and they do have a relapse, and they slip up and they make a mistake and they use meth again or whatever their drug of choice is. They're so ashamed and they're so sad, and I don't know the exact word for it, but had that person been stopped and busted again prior to them being through the program, they wouldn't have near the level of shame.
Right.
They wouldn't care. They just be like, you know, whatever, you got me again, let's do this. Now that they've been through the program and they've got all these achievements, and everybody's, hey, look at this person, they've done all these good things, and then they have a relapse and they're over here and they get caught again, or they have a dirty drug test, you know, because part of the program they have to be drug tested, and they have a dirty drug test. Just the look of shame and the sorrow, that gives me hope that that person is still wanting to beat addiction. They're still savable. They're still salvageable, because if they didn't have that shame and that sorrow for failing that drug test or getting arrested for something else, you can't help that person. People that still have shame and still have guilt about having a dirty drug test, you can still work with that person.
Right.
They can still be saved.
This program, I've also noticed, they feel, they get their self-esteem back. And going in, they don't have it at all. And all of their accomplishments that they've gotten while they're in the program gives them such a sense of pride. And so that's why they feel so shameful when they
think about it. You've got people, say, for example, they're 30 years old, and they've never had a full-time job. They've never got a driver's license, a valid one in the state. They've never had custody of their children for more than a couple months at a time because they're in and out of prison. And then now this program gives them the opportunity to learn the skills.
Be an adult.
To finally grow up and, hey, okay, I know what I need to do. I've got a job. I've got a driver's license. I've got my kids. And then now, you know, it's, I don't know, like I said, it's a good thing.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Greg.
Thank you.
Is this wrap?